and welcome to FTB Fridays. Welcome back, actually, to FTB Fridays. It is Friday, the 13th of August, 2021. I'm your host, Jason C. McLean. Been off for a little while since Just for Laughs, and welcome back to Samantha Gold.
Hi.
Hi. How's it going? How's your summer been?
I'm not going to lie, it has not been easy. I feel like anybody who has any kind of chronic health issue has been really suffering in this heat wave. And it certainly brought to light, issues of accessibility of air conditioning and stuff like that. Apparently, paramedics are being really overworked just handling it. And some of them are suffering from heat exhaustion as well. So I personally have chronic pain, and this heat wave has basically been a constant pain flare for me.
But other than that,
I'm very fortunate that I have a couple of window units that I keep on high in my apartment, and as long as I'm in air conditioning and I have access to my medication, I'm fine. You
have a new mural up too, for what I understand?
Yes, that's true. I recently completed a mural just around the corner from Lionel Groux Metro at Union United Church in the courtyard to commemorate a tragedy in which a whole bunch of Black children drowned in 1954. And unfortunately, because it was 1954, nobody was held accountable for the tragedy at Lake of Two Mountains. And part of the reason I was commissioned to do this mural was that a very dear family friend, he lost two sisters in the tragedy, and it completely destroyed his family. And it's a huge thing. One of the reasons why so many kids drowned is that at the time there were no boat safety requirements, and a lot of the kids couldn't swim. And the reason why the courtyard was actually chosen for the mural was because the summer camp that these kids were all part of actually left from that courtyard. And incidentally, for a little city history, the building that the mural is actually painted on used to be Oscar Peterson's house, which does certainly explain the campaign, the attempt to rename Lionel Groux after him, because it's literally around the corner on DeLille.
Exactly. It's segued into politics, I guess, local politics. The Montreal elections in this November, and one place in particular that's really going to be an interesting place to watch is where you live, the borough of NDG, Notre-Dame-de-Grâce, Côte-des-Neiges.
Absolutely.
Côte-des-Neiges, Notre-Dame-de-Grâce. Yeah.
Sue Montgomery started her own party, Courage, after the break with Ensemble
Projet Montréal.
Projet Montréal. Sorry.
Yeah.
It's early.
Projet Montréal now has they've announced their candidate. It's Gracia Kazaki Katawa, who's actually the first Black woman to ever be on the council, the administration council of the Conseil des Infirmières. She's very big into healthcare,
which is a huge feat because the Conseil des Infirmières has frequently been accused of racism and language discrimination in how they issue their exams and all that stuff. So to have a woman of color on that is a big deal. And certainly to present one as a candidate in the borough is a big deal because NDG Côte-des-Neiges is one of the most ethnically diverse boroughs in the city, and it's one of the biggest.
Yeah, candidate for borough mayor, and she will be running against, of course, incumbent mayor Sue Montgomery, Lionel Perez, who was the former leader of interim leader of Denis Coderre's party before Denis Coderre took it back over,
and he was the opposition as well.
Yeah, Matthew Kerr is running under the Valorama Homeless ticket. And there's also Alex Montagano, who's running for the NDG Côte-des-Neiges party. So there's 5 confirmed big name candidates or at least large candidates for the post of borough mayor. I mean, how do we know what's going to happen? How are we going to
It's interesting because I looked a little bit at sorry, what's her name again? The one who's on the Nurses Council?
Gracia Katawa.
Yeah, what she's promising from everything I've read is a drama-free leadership. And it's obviously a direct reference to the legal battles that Sue Montgomery has been facing over the past year and a half so far she's won. And it's interesting because I read the legal decision against Valérie Plante, against the city of Montreal. And then I took a look at sort of the charges against her, accusing her of, I think it was bullying and kind of misconduct. And what I found interesting is that some of the people that are claiming that Montgomery is a bully seem to be implicated in that case that she won. Yeah. So it sounds a bit like phony charges due to sour grapes. But that's just my opinion. I could be talking out of my tush.
You're following the story pretty closely, though. What about the average NDG voter, though? Like what are they going to choose?
It's interesting because the NDG Côte-des-Neiges, you have an interesting mix of sort of, immigrant families, first, second, third generation immigrant families, and you have sort of middle class and upper middle class whites. And the impression that I get from voters in general is that they're not entirely happy with Valérie Plante's leadership as mayor overall, that they are ultimately disappointed. They feel like, for example, her bike paths are a waste of time and resources. And it's certainly affected a lot of disabled and elderly residents in the borough. I recently attended a meeting to discuss how we could make the city more accessible. And the consensus was that the bike paths, for example, in the borough, while they're certainly good for the environment, they've actually hampered people with physical disabilities from accessing their homes, either through deliveries and all that sort of thing. And so, I think the impression that I get from the average NDG voter is that they are fed up with all the drama, and that.
But are those Plante's bike paths, or are they Montgomery's bike paths?
Well, I think don't forget that they used to be together.
Yeah.
So you have to they used to be together. So you have to ask yourself, you have to ask yourself the exact question that you pointed out: whose bike paths are there? But what I have noticed, at least from Montgomery's team, is that they're more open to sort of adapting these paths to the needs of more vulnerable residents.
Plante actually I completely just forgot about this before we went on the air, but Plante actually, one of Prochet's new candidates, not an NDG, is actually a sort of well-known disability advocate.
Mm-hmm.
I'd have to look up who that is, but that's in one of the other ridings too. So it seems
it's obviously in response to criticism that some of the things she's done under her leadership have made accessibility worse. You're hearing about elderly residents complaining that delivery trucks and accessible transportation can't get as close to their homes as they need, when some of them are in wheelchairs, some of them, like myself, walk with a cane, and it's caused all sorts of problems. When an easier solution would be, instead of creating, for example, concrete barriers for these bike paths, putting up temporary fiberglass ones that can be removed in case assisted transit needs to stop there.
Yeah. Well, one thing is, I noticed one thing when she's doing in general, like one of the big criticisms after the last election was that there were not that many candidates, or hardly any candidates of color elected. Mm-hmm. And now she's actually, like, a lot of the candidates that are running are candidates of color. So she sort of seems to be like listening to the criticism and trying to change some things.
One thing I will say to Montgomery's credit is that she seems very determined to maintain dialogue with the citizens of the borough, that she has a lot of sort of open consultations, that she wants to speak to ordinary people and address their needs. But the impression that I get from the average citizen of NDG Côte-des-Neiges is that they are very much fed up with the legal battles that have surrounded Montgomery. They're literally fed up with all the drama, and they just want somebody who's going to manage the borough without wasting tax dollars on this or that legal battle.
So could it be possible? I mean, maybe that's why Katha was promising to be the no drama candidate, and I guess as a nurse you can try to do. But then maybe they might cancel each other out, in which case Perez wins.
Yeah,
like he just comes, like the two vote, their voters are the majority of the borough. They cancel each other out. One place though where it's kind of hard to predict for the first time in 30 years is the riding of Snowden. Because Marvin Rotran has been there forever, and he's not running this time.
Yeah, well, he's getting old. As we were discussing before we started recording, he's getting on in the years. So I kind of don't blame him if he wanted to retire. That he decided, you know what, my ticker can't handle it anymore. I'm done.
But the thing is, I'm wondering if he endorses a candidate or actually starts working for a particular candidate, that might actually sway the election. But otherwise, I think it's pretty much anyone's for the taking.
Certainly, and I know that the candidate that Plante is running oh shoot, his name eludes me for the moment, but he's a sociology and anthropology professor. And I can't help but wonder if the citizens are going to go, so what, he's going to treat us like a study?
Yeah.
That would certainly be my impression.
Yeah, well, that's NDG. So NDG, then Snowden, NDG Côte-des-Neiges Borough, and Snowden in particular, really are something we need to watch. But then we have
Absolutely.
Montreal
And
North.
this is not to say that academia doesn't involve a certain amount of political savvy. It certainly does. But the question is, how will those skills translate to running a borough?
True. Well, yeah, but that would just be running a district. And I mean, what did Martin Rotran do before he was a city councilor, or was he born a city councilor?
I don't even know. I did have an opportunity to speak to him a couple of times personally after I unfortunately witnessed that hate crime at Ville Marie Metro by STM cops, and he seemed a very nice guy. But the impression that I got, just from speaking to him, is that he was very harried, like always stressed, always running around. And I am going to be watching to see if he ends up endorsing anybody, because I think that will carry a certain amount of weight, given how much of a staple he's been in the area for so long.
Yeah, in fact, it would be as smart as this if some guy from some party just happened to have the name Marvin Rotrand or Martin Rotrand or something like that, and just put their name on the ballot, and people will just vote for him anyways.
Yeah, but I think that if somebody up and changed their name to that, as you describe, most people I like to think are smart enough to see right through a tactic like that.
Yeah.
It would be hella creative. I'd be probably sitting back with a bag of popcorn laughing.
Yeah,
not chips, Marvin, it is hot.
Martin Rotrand, something like similar.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so moving along, you say another place that's interesting is Montreal Nord.
Yeah, because one of the people who is running with sort of on Valerie Plante's ticket is Will Prosper.
Yeah, he's a well-known
activist, and he's coming under fire by Christine Black, who's the current mayor of the area, and because of the uptick in gun violence. And there's been I don't know if you've been following the headlines, but there's been a huge amount recently of shootings.
Yeah, mostly
in Montreal. We're seeing one every other week. What experts are saying is that it's because, we have a porous border and there are a lot of guns in the United States. So gangs are kind of taking advantage of the situation to, quote, assert their turf. And Black has been criticizing Prosper because he's taken sort of the Plante tack of defunding the police and saying, no, we don't need to defund right now. With the uptick in violence, we need more police. But you have to ask yourself, how much of this violence is related to issues like poverty, issues related to low cost, the lack of available housing, and what would happen if we if the city diverted resources to addressing those systemic issues over just sicking the cops on people in the borough.
Yeah. Well, you know what? We already have a defunded police in Montreal. It's called Westmount Public Security.
Mm-hmm.
It's essentially defunding the police. It means reallocating resources. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez made a comment about that. Look to wealthy communities. They have separate police. They have different forces that handle the local complaints, like the kids drinking in the park or the.
But at the same time, those
tickets. Yeah.
Those same wealthy people frequently come out against defunding the police because rather than pay their fair share of taxes to address systemic issues, they'd rather put poor people and especially minorities who are poor in prison.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that certainly needs to be recognized.
Yeah, there's also the police brotherhood. For example, I know also Dupont. Yeah, definitely. She said she's looking into to defunding, moving some funds from the police, and the police union jumped on her for that. The police union
of course they did, because they're constantly saving their own butts. And this is not to disparage the police entirely. There are some good things that they do. I've actually been privileged, and I understand that I was extremely lucky to have a positive experience with the cops. I was once walking along the street in excruciating pain. They gave me a ride home and carried my stuff upstairs for me.
Yeah, no, they can do good things.
But they've also come under fire recently for killing black people in Quebec.
One thing too is Balarama Holness is actually he's outright come out for defund the police in this campaign, which is I guess maybe more to the left than Plante. Though with him, it's a matter of I don't know if he has the like I've seen in debates he sounds great, but I don't know if he has the the ground game that both Plante and Coder have, because that's one thing. With such a small voter turnout, you gotta be good in debates and stuff, but you also got to have a ground game. You got to have
You
people
have to
getting the people
communicate
out to
with
vote.
people.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think I sort of smile because he used to be a Montreal Alouettes player, and my dad is a season ticket holder, so I can't help but wonder if he will appeal to if he'll appeal to sort of Alouettes fans, but at the
Well,
same time, you know, it's like you said, he doesn't necessarily have a ground game, and I can't help but wonder if he's really determined to be mayor, or if this is just some way to get sort of experience on the ground before moving on to another realm of politics.
like Melanie Jolie, for example.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, well, one way to actually check on that is actually to like find out. I don't think he announced it yet, but who his co-candidate or co-listier is, because every mayoral candidate has a co-candidate in a specific riding, and if they don't get the mayor, but their co-candidate wins, they can take their seat. Now, for example, Melanie Jolie, instead of running a co-candidate in Peter McGill or in Shaughnessy Village, where she has personal political history and her candidate won, she chose her co-candidate to be the one running against Peter McLean in NDG, who's
Well, Peter
very
McLean isn't
popular.
going. Peter McLean isn't going anywhere. He's been a staple in the borough for a long time.
Yeah, exactly. Moving on, speaking other elections, federally, we might have as of Sunday, the Trudeau might call a federal election. Yeah,
I don't know if that's such a good idea.
no, and it would be for the end of September too.
Yeah, I mean, first off, Montreal, we're a pretty decent riding electoral.
Yeah.
The individual ridings in Montreal, and I can't help but wonder if this is irresponsible given a pandemic. Like, in the midst of what's looking like a fourth wave, like Quebec went from what is it, 56 cases a day to back to 350.
Yeah.
Over 350 cases a day. And while yes, the bulk of the people getting infected are the ones who aren't vaccinated, is it really a responsible choice to allow people to gather at a polling station to submit votes? And in fact, I know that at least on the municipal part of sort of Coder running again, part of his ticket is to allow mail-in voting. I saw that was one of his big platforms. But
also Montreal, we have fixed election dates. In the States, they have fixed election dates for presidential elections.
And in Canada, it's when do we dissolve Parliament?
Yeah, so basically, with Plante and whatever, with Montreal election, they didn't have a choice. That's when the election is. Whereas Trudeau has a choice. In fact, it's not even like it's not even like he's losing a confidence vote. He just wants to dissolve Parliament.
Well, I know that the NDP is against having a federal election for the very reason we just discussed. Is it really wise to have an election in the midst of a fourth wave? Yeah. And my understanding is that, with a few exceptions out west, the Conservative Party isn't doing all that great. And I think part of the problem is that Andrew Scheer, in the last federal election, his stance brought him too close to the American definition of conservatism, in terms of curbing women's rights, in terms of curbing LGBTQ rights. His absence at the pride parades was very telling, whereas, Jagmeet Singh was dancing with everybody, which was awesome, by the way.
And Trudeau too, but Trudeau
is a staple at these events.
Yeah, he's always been into performative liberalism.
Exactly, and what you're seeing is that, where the federal Conservatives are concerned, Erin O'Toole's leadership is very, very new.
Yeah.
It's very fresh. And while he has been, from what I gather, he's been working his butt off to sort of distance himself and bring the Conservative Party back to a more Canadian conservatism, and not so much, Canadian conservatism, meaning fiscal responsibility, putting finances back in the hands of individuals as opposed to the government, stuff like that. Well, I can't help but wonder if Trudeau is trying to milk the fact that his presence is still relatively new, and because of that, he hasn't built up all that much momentum.
It's so new that when you brought up the Conservatives and you said Andrew Scheer, I was like, wait, who's the current leader? What's his name? What's that guy's name? I was glad you said it. But if you think about it, I
call him Mr. Potato Head because I find he looks like one.
We haven't actually had a mustache. The old Conservative Party ended with Mulroney, because what we have now is basically it's the merged party of the old. It's basically the Reform Party.
Well, I remember at one point they tried to combine it. There was like the
did.
Conservative Reform Alliance Party, and it became, I remember, do you remember Royal Canadian Air Force?
Yeah, yeah.
It became the butt of jokes because it stood for, am I allowed to say the C word on the air?
Sure.
Crap.
Crap, yeah.
It stood for crap. And of course, all the local, you know, all the national Canadian comedy shows jumped on that. And so, yeah, it's the Reform Party with it, you know, Preston Manning's signature squeak.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's interesting. I remember They took
over the Conservative Party, basically. They said it was a merger, but they took over the old Progressive Conservative Party. So if you want to get back to that politics, you got to get back to the old Progressive Conservative Party. Now,
making it progressive again. It's interesting because I have a lot of friends out west who had a lot of trouble understanding why Quebec didn't vote Conservative. They said, aren't they fed up with Trudeau corruption and all this? And I said, yeah, but they will never vote for a candidate who identifies as openly Catholic, given, you know, the generational wounds that the Catholic Church has left on Quebec.
Also, we have the Bloc too. They just go to
the Bloc, yes, but
one thing though, the local Bloc, our local provincial Conservative Party, aka the CAQ, is getting they're kind of the controversial move there. We're doing vaccine passports in Quebec.
I have mixed feelings about that because on the one hand, I think that Quebec would be extremely wise, and I think Canada at large would be extremely wise to follow the French example, which is that you cannot go into public places, spread your disease if you have not gotten the vaccine, and then demand services from the public health system. And so in that respect, I kind of understand. There was a very good piece on CNN about it. But on the other, how many of the unvaccinated are unvaccinated not because they didn't want the vaccine, but because they couldn't get it?
Yeah.
Because they were immune compromised, or perhaps they were simply too young. You know, the vaccines are only open for people over the age of 12.
Yeah, that's one. And also, too, people, for example, like I'm wondering also, like, I think it probably covered, but like people who are like, with what do you call it? The name just dropped me. People who don't have ID, the undocumented.
Yeah, that's certainly going to be a problem.
I know they vaccinated the homeless near me in Cabot Square.
Not just people who don't have ID, but people who don't have a phone. Because, you know, there's a couple, you know, I don't know how the vaccine passport, I don't know in detail what their plan is.
Either on your phone or you can have a paper version.
Well, I have a paper version sealed into a little Ziploc that I'm going to carry in my purse. Maybe I'll reinforce it with that plastic stuff. But
what I wonder about is the people who have to, for example, it's not going to be the government enforcing it. It's going to be like waiters at restaurants and bartenders who have to enforce this. And
as if they don't have enough problems already, dealing with unruly customers, self-righteous people, you know, people who demand that their pets be accommodated in the restaurant, stuff like that. Yeah. My concern is I've heard sort of horror stories about people on public transportation not obeying mask mandates as it is. And, you know, while there are some people calling for more enforcement, I worry that the enforcement would fall, for example, to the cops, to the STM cops, who have been known, the numbers have confirmed it, to disproportionately target visible and sexual minorities, when, at least in Canada, it seems like the vast majority of anti-vaxxers are white.
Yeah. So it might not.
So that's going to be a big problem, you know.
Well, the thing is I think one of the things with this vaccine passport, and this is so it was pointed out to me, like that a lot of the people who are unvaccinated are the 18 to 29 set, and it's not that they're anti-vax, it's that they just haven't bothered to go do it. And that's what, like, limiting access to bars and restaurants is a direct way to, apparently a lot of them have started to get vaccinated after that was announced. They're like, okay, fine. They're against it. They just didn't have the time to do it. And now,
I can't help but wonder if that's also on their employers, because we are currently suffering from a labor shortage right now, and employers should be busting their tuchuses to offer incentives, you know, instead of just calling workers entitled. You know, maybe the government should be encouraging employers to offer incentives to give them time off to go get these shots, because people have a limited number of sick days and everybody's playing the game of, do I have a cold, flu, or COVID? You know? And because of that, I've spoken to many people who have admitted to me that they're all out of sick days because of it. because if they have any kind of cold symptoms, they got to go get tested, and they have to wait 48 hours or so before they get a negative result, and then do they still have to stay in isolation and all that? So if they haven't bothered to get vaccinated, I can't help but wonder if that's entirely on young people, or if it's the people who they're working for who are at fault because they're not giving them the time off. When I think it should be, I think employers should be legally mandated to do so.
Yeah, exactly.
Not to mention the recovery time, because while I am eternally grateful for having gotten the vaccine, I was sick for a week after my second shot because the side effects of shot number 2 tend to be worse. And my partner, he had fever for about 3 days.
I was actually more tired after shot 1, and tiredness, that was the effect I had. But shot 2, I actually didn't really affect me.
Let me tell you, you're lucky, because my partner had fever and severe fatigue. I had fever, severe body aches. My chronic pain got worse for a couple of days. But at the end of the day, I'm still eternally grateful that I got the vaccine, because as somebody who's immune compromised, at least from a COVID stance, I'm currently more dangerous to the unvaccinated than they are to me. And that is a massive relief. And it's given me a lot of freedom that I certainly didn't have before the vaccine.
Yeah. And one thing,
not just from a practical perspective, getting into bars, restaurants, etc. I mean, I don't really go to bars, but anyway, but also sort of from a mental perspective, because I no longer feel the need to stay trapped in this heat, okay? But generally speaking, I no longer feel trapped indoors.
Yeah, because I mean, like, even if you catch it, chances are you won't in the hospital, because if you're vaccinated.
Lindsey Graham in the States, fully vaccinated, he still got COVID. And he said that because of his vaccine, his symptoms were basically like a mild flu.
Yeah, or like a bad cold. Well, let's hope that people do get vaccinated. Let's hope that this ends.
Certainly encourage it. I would take it even a step further. The age of consent for things like vaccinations is 14 and up in Quebec. And I would say that if young people have anti-vax parents, I encourage them to do their homework. And if they decide that it is for them, and I certainly hope they do, and I certainly pray that they do, what's stopping them from going to get vaccinated under their parents' nose?
Yeah,
I certainly encourage it.
Wear long sleeve shirts, which is hard
in this heat. Or just say you got a mosquito bite.
Yeah. Okay.
Put a rainbow Band-Aid on it.
Exactly. Yeah. And then let's hopefully we all find a way to enjoy to at least survive the heat this weekend. Samantha, thank you very
hydrated. Much. They say stay in AC as long as possible.
People can follow you on Instagram and Facebook at
Sam I Am Artist MTL on Instagram, and on Facebook, it's facebook.com/SamIamArt. And I encourage everybody to take a selfie with the mural if they get a chance to see it. It's literally around the corner from Lionel Groom, inside the courtyard of the church. You don't even have to cross the street.
Okay, we'll put that in the description as well too. Again, thank you very much for joining us. Now you can follow me at Jason C. McLean on Twitter and Instagram. Instagram, I just take pictures of like nature, I think.
It's still awesome, Jason.
Yeah, thank you. But also for follow Forget the Box, give us a like, share, and smash that like button. Share and subscribe on Facebook, on YouTube, Facebook video, at Forget the Box on Twitter and Instagram, and of course there's our app, the Android app, the iOS one still coming soon, and of course for daily content, new content, news, politics, arts, and what have you, check out forgetthebox.net. We'll catch you next week for another FTB Friday.